sorry.
I said that many, too many, really too many years ago, I had a personal excursion alone in the countryside of Roma. I had just moved from northern Italy, where I was born, to the south, the deep south, the terrible south. And I went alone to the countryside and I met this plant, Styrax officinalis. I knew it because I had been reading one significant paper days before, but none of the peasants I interviewed knew the name or the existence of this tree. Only one old man told me that, yes, I know it. The name is Mela. Well, I was interested in names. I will tell you this story afterwards. But it was practically unknown in the countryside, despite of the fact that it was extremely common in this landscape, a classic, unfortunately, Mediterranean landscape, because, why do I say unfortunately? Because it is a disrupted ecosystem. According to the ruling climate there, we are east of Roma, in the hills of Tivoli. You see, these plants should belong to North African type of ecosystems. It is a disrupted landscape where the remnants of the previous oak forest, indicated by these black shapes of the evergreen broadleaf Quercus ilex, probably in English holm oak, should be dominate. And these plants, instead, this Graminea is growing in northern Africa at higher altitudes, reminding a kind of subalpine steppe in Morocco. So the mixture is very, very, very astonishing here. And you see these gray shapes are the probably feral olive trees. I don't know if the name could be applied to plants as well. So they look wild, and they are probably wild, but usually agronomists are more accurate, and they say they could be feral. But the greenish crowns here belong to Styrax. So the idea that Styrax was belonging to a landscape which was disrupted persecuted me, because there were other places where Styrax could give the idea to belong to a kind of savanna-like vegetation or forest vegetation, as here, those individuals. But as you see, the location of these individuals has given origin to a legend that the plant should have been used by peasants for some purpose, unknown purpose, and or introduced. We like in Italy to speak about introduced plants because we usually can relate them to noble individuals or historical persons who probably loved plants and introduced them. So the plant is very restricted close to Roma, and it is considered non-native. And this consideration has no support in literature. It is only a legend, but it has been so popular that in the regular floras of Italy and in the editions we have since the beginning of the 20th century, do quote Styrax officinalis as an introduced plant. Who could introduce a plant in Italy? A Roman emperor. Who among Roman emperors loved plants? Adrianus. Why? Because around the ruins of Villa Adriana, which is an enormous estate close to Tivoli, this plant grows hugely. And this is the only ideological association with the introduction. Adrianus loves plants, therefore he introduces from the East, because he loved Greeks, he loved the Anatolians, he introduced the plants from somewhere else. But the fact is that if you could interpret the figures we looked before, you should see that in Italy, it grows exactly with the same associates in a very restricted place. You see, close to Roma, Tivoli, and it does not. This figure is from 1949, and today, despite of the fact that the plant is extremely common within this area, close to Roma, it has not gone through these boundaries 1 meter. So it stays where it is, despite of the fact that it is so luxuriant in its vegetative shape. We discovered another place in much more south, close to Naples, where you see the same disrupted landscape here. You see that it grows as a multi-stemmed tree with this pubescent leaves, and this landscape has been destroyed by fire many times, but it resplodes growth hugely, while other shrubs or other small trees do not in the same place. So fire is favoring it in the competition in very bad ecological situations. But anyway, in the core area of its range, which we will be able to see is in Anatolia and the Aegean area today, it grows in Italy with the same associates, Cercis iriquastrum, which is a leguminosa, and Celtis australis, which is an ulmacea, Carpinus orientalis, betulaceae, and Pistachia terebinthus, cerastraceae. The same plants are following Styrax in Italy, as well as in all the range of its area. So for an ignorant plant geographer, it should be completely at home in Italy as well. So people who have visited the places, the locations where this Styrax grows and documents himself on literature, show that Styrax should grow in Italy in exactly the same chenological envelope. So it is difficult to believe to the import, but authoritative people, all florists who compiled floras over the Italian region, decided that should have been introduced by the Crusades of the Romans. And this is the same landscape that you see in Cyprus. It has been portrayed in November 2015. It is exactly the same type of disrupted landscape with the same associates, remnants of the broadleaf evergreen Mediterranean forest and remnants of the sub-Mediterranean forest dominated by semi-deciduous oaks, for example, Quercus pubescens, the downy oak. It is exactly the same environment. The fact is that this is the first historical map produced on Styrax by Rickley. The last edition is from 1949, but it is much older. And you see the core range of the plant is in the Aegean area with the coastal Anatolia, northern Palestina, and eastern Greece. Those places have been added by us, and so the original map of Rickley recognized the native status of this plant only in that area. In order to understand something, we tried to do years ago, many years ago, a kind of modeling of the potential niche. And as you see, it doesn't correspond to any realistic scenario, because it should have been extended elsewhere, not along the coast, as it usually does in Eastern Europe, in Southeastern Europe, and in Western Asia, in Palestina, and in Campania, the region of Naples, where we detected these two new stands it should be widespread elsewhere in the first range of valleys after the coastal east of the coastal mountains. It is a completely unrealistic thing. So we decided to start a genetic analysis. And this is the year when I met Laura Parducci here. And I proposed to her to do an investigation about the assessment of the genetic structure of the Styrax population in Italy in order to find some kind of indication against this hypothesis of the introduction, which is supported even by scholars that contributed to the institution of a new regional park in Latium, which has Styrax as a symbol of the park, but propagate the idea that it has been introduced by the Roman Emperor Adrianus in order to attract people. Because in Italy, we appreciate this type of link with the humanistic culture. And there is a tradition before the Linnaean taxonomy to quote among pre-Linnaean botanists in Italy that this plant is very important. It could be a wild plant because it is cultivated in the garden of Prince Borgia and so on. And only because of this cultivation, the plant was quoted for the first time. So if you are not accustomed to this, you can believe that nearly all plants in Italy have been introduced. Nearly all plants. And I remember that speaking about the associates that I showed you before, all of these associates have been sooner or later considered to have been imported during the Middle Ages or a little bit early by prominent people in Italy. So in fact, all our woody flora should be non-native. So Laura and I started to decided to collect individuals in order to submit them to genetic analysis. And we started to collect. Alessandro participated, other people participated. We collected many individuals, 328 individuals, 18 representative populations. But it was difficult to get populations from other places outside those classic routes of the tourism, which could allow us to provide without any difficulty those individuals. And they were displayed from Roma to the Aegean area, but we had difficulties to collect. We were not able to collect material from the Levant and from France. So we got individuals from the herbarium. We got herbarium individuals, which were able to produce valuable material anyway, which has been investigated. And what happened? We submitted to this type of detection. I am not a geneticist, so I cannot go into the details of this type of the benefits of this particular aspect of the methods. Both chloroplast DNA and non-maternal DNA has been investigated, and the software structure has been used in order to represent graphically the results which we obtained. And while the DNA analysis has been performed in Portugal, part of the sequencing and the analysis of the polymorphism, nucleotide polymorphism, has been performed in Japan by one of our colleagues. What has been obtained is, during this period, we perform an updated map of the distribution, a complete updated, most updated map of the occurrence of Styrax. So this is the map we would like to publish in order to show the present day distribution of the plants. And we considered also the French stands, which were considered to be imported by monks, because someone believed that the monks in Provence do obtain some iron starch from the plant, which is not true. They sell starch, but it is coming from Liquidambar styracifera, which is an American plant. And the same thing happens here in Turkey, where it is still sold with the name Styrax, but this is coming from Liquidambar orientale, which commercially is called Styrax, Styraja in Greek, which is Styrax. And this confusion has been going on for centuries. So there is a legend that someone is extracting the starch from the plant, something which is not true. There is no indication wherever you go about the extraction of this product, which instead comes from Liquidambar, which has a simpler name, Liquidambar styracifera, which comes from the United States, and Liquidambar orientale, which is locally called Styrax in the formerly Greek-speaking area of southern Anatolia, formerly, unfortunately. So as you see, we have added many more stands in southern Palestine and much more south than what it was reported before. The most impressive stands are in Cyprus, where it populates entire areas. But as you see here, the distribution of the plant is always scattered. Many, many, many small populations. Everywhere it is rare where it is present. So the condition of the Italian condition is not so uncommon and comparable to the one we find all over the range of the species. Anyway, this is the result of the genetical analysis. I think it is a very pictorial image. And for someone completely unfamiliar with, especially with the linguistics of the genetic, I think this is a satisfaction to see that it is possible to understand that, for example, from these plots, which show the structure of all the genetic structures of all the population, you see that there are clearly two different lineages of Styrax in this large area. And the boundary between these two lineages is exactly the following. Here you have the Italian populations, and here you have the population from Western Greece to the Levant. So there are two completely different lineages. And they are, and the reliability of this result is given by this diagram, which shows that this type of subdivision in two groups is very reliable. Also, the subdivision in three groups is quite reliable. The other one, even if they specify much more, the differences are more or less having the same significance or reliability as the previous one. But these two show that there are the only populations which show similarity with both lineages are located in completely unpredictable areas. And these areas are Cyprus, which is nearly the more or less the easternmost region where Styrax grows, but they have much in common with the Italian ones. And this is very peculiar. So you see that the Italian ones, some of the Italian ones share much with some population in Cyprus, in Crete, but not in Rhodos, for example, which is much more west, or in this case, north of Crete, and with populations in central Anatolia, Turkey. You see, Cyprus here has much in common with the Italian ones, and Western Greece, Attica, and Turkey, especially Turkey, are something in between. While Rhodos, Crete, and Peloponnesus, which is much closer to Italy, are very far from the genetical assessment of the Italian ones. So the geographical structure of this result is quite complicated, or at least it could be, it could look like a complicated one. This is another type of the representation of the results based on this similarity tree, maximum likelihood tree, based on this type of polymorphism which is used here. And you see that according to the results, the Turkish and the West Greek in Attica population apparently are quite reliable as the ancestors, the group which has more has a larger legacy of something ancient, while the Cretan, Peloponnesian, and South Aegean populations are extremely distinct from the Italian ones, which are very different among each other. As you see, there are different groups located quite close. There are only some tenths of kilometers between these areas, but there is a great variation even here among populations in Italy, and surprising closeness to Cyprus that we have to take into account. And here we have some kind of support for the idea that populations of Turkey and Western Greece, excuse me, has a kind of ancestral character in comparison to the other ones. But here you see the Italian populations. This histogram is showing the genetic variability based on heterozygosis. So you see the Italian populations here have, despite of the fact that they are so isolated and so few individuals in any population, they have a large variability, genetic variability. So that idea that some paleobotanists have in considering fragmented populations as genetically impoverished and in this way close to extinction is not confirmed here. Here is surely Styrax in Italy close to extinction because the stands are extremely small, and any event could produce the annihilation of any of them. But anyway, despite of this fact, the genetic variability is high, at least as high as we have in the core area where populations are a little bit larger or very often coalescents. Anyway, the Turkish and the West Greek populations seems to be the ancestral ones. We have to keep in mind for the next discussion. So, and this is the result of the maternal DNA, which is supporting the same distinction. We have distinct lineages anyway. You see, this blue one, which is common here in the Far East, is so emphasized here. And anyway, this is reliable in another way because it has to do with the propagation of seeds. So this is what happens terrestrially and has enough to do with the transport of pollen. We have to note that the pollen of Styrax is so rare that it has never been collected in any remnants. It is not recorded in any remnants of the Pleistocene in all Europe. There are only very ancient remnants of pollen from the Eocene, but not from recent times. So it is a very bad producer of pollen. So we have to rely upon the production of seeds for the propagation of these plants. But there is no animal recorded as a probably medium for this, for any zoochory. It produces very large fruits that no one eats but the cows. Only cows, apparently, and the peasants are, support this idea, nor the boars either, which practically eat everything, not the goats. Only the cows eat this type of fruit. And in fact, the only few places where the plants have been seen as seedlings is the place where the cows leave their dung. Otherwise, this is why probably the plant doesn't go on, doesn't go farther its present-day boundaries. So this could be an interesting basis for future discussions. The fact that it does not go outside the area where it has been recorded previously. This result shows another thing which we could not represent in the former diagrams, namely the fact that the individual coming from the Levant, which we obtain here in the herbarium, are extremely close to the southernmost individuals in the Roman province. The highest similarity, they are encompassed in this dendrogram in the same place where this location is recorded here. And the French ones, anyway, are very close to another locality, which is more or less in the same area. So this could sustain also the hypothesis of the fact that the French lineage, the French populations has not been imported, because the legend of the import is very, has been reducing also the French stance to a very recent import. So the results, these simple results, are at least converging to one undeniable statement, that this is evidence for the native status of the plants in Italy and probably in France as well. Because in order to accumulate this type of differentiation, a long period is required, which is exceeding the 2,000–3,000 years of the potential postulated Roman import. And another curiosity, they exceed also this difference, this obtained differentiation. The divergence is much older than another hypothesis, that the first Neolithic colonizers of Italy should have imported it from Cyprus, because there are archaeological undeniable evidence that agriculture, or the package of the agriculture, or the first agriculturalists, the cultural package of the first agriculturalists came from Cyprus into Italy, based on the remnants of the breeding of pigs. So they are supposed to have come per sea, across the sea, to the Italian peninsula somewhere in the 7th, 8th millennium before our era, and colonized southern Italy. And colonizing southern Italy, someone, a French scholar, who realized or detected that the goats in France do eat Styrax, said that, you see, peasants have imported these, and old peasants, 8,000 years ago, imported Styrax from Cyprus in order to feed the goats in France. And unfortunately, this document has been quoted by Fritsch, who is a very prominent scholar who studied Styrax, the first analysis of the global genetic assessment of the genus has been done by Fritsch at the end of the last century. And he quoted this idea, which became, as we used to say now, viral, unfortunately, and has endorsed all people who are willing to interpret occurrence of plants as imports. But this result is clearly showing that the accumulated differentiation, genetic differentiation, exceeds in the order of chronological order 100,000 of years this possibility of import. So we cannot suggest that Neanderthalians could be responsible of this import. But anyway, this substantial result enhances another type of consideration. This is the distribution of the genus Styrax in the world. And Fritsch detected in the 19th that probably on the basis of fossils, that probably the genus originated somewhere in Europe or in the northern hemisphere of Eurasia, and that the American differentiation of many species took place by a kind of colonizations across the North Atlantic land bridges, which especially in the Eocene were very, very, very effective. So the earliest fossils, pollen corns, in fact, during the Eocene, speak about a potential origin of Styrax in this area, which is the area of the large sea Tethys, which preceded the collision between the land masses, the African and the Eurasian land masses. There was a sea here, which originated an assessment of the vegetation, which here had an enormous belt of evergreen, broadleaf, laurophyllous forests. But probably the conquest of North and Southern America began with the migration across the North Atlantic bridges. The fact is that Styrax officinalis, which is the one who populates this area, the only species, here we have many species which are both evergreen and semi-evergreen as, or nearly deciduous as Styrax officinalis is. The fact is that Styrax here, especially this Styrax redivivus, exactly, has been considered by the less parsimonious taxonomists as a subspecies of Styrax officinalis, and it has been called up to 15 years ago Styrax officinalis subspecies redivivus, suggesting the fact or emphasizing the fact that they are so closely related from the point of view of the phenotype that they could have been classified as more or less the same subtaxa, two subtaxa of the same taxon. The fact is that Fritsch detected much more higher genetic differentiation, so the status of different species has been confirmed recently. But anyway, here there are two different species. I don't remember the name of one of these growing in the eastern United States are so close to Styrax officinale that the problem of the North Atlantic land bridges has been seriously threatened, because in this case, a kind of connection must have been very recent as well. But these bridges apparently disappeared in the Eocene. Some students, some scholars today, suggesting remnants of Quercus in, interpreting the remnants of Quercus in Iceland, suppose that, predict that these bridges must have been active at least as late as the end of the Miocene, 5 million years ago. So some type of exchange, which could justify the similarity of the warm temperate flora here and here, could be explained. But anyway, if we consider the fossil remnants of Styrax, and we take into account that today its occurrence in Italy is the legacy of a native the colonization of a native class, here we have those fossils, both seeds and pollen grains of Styrax from the Eocene, 50 million years ago, and the occurrence of macrofossils of Styrax in the middle Miocene, around 7 to 10 million years ago. As you see, it is widespread in what today is the domain of the deciduous vegetation in Europe. But at that time, we have many inner seas, so apparently the climatic conditions of that time were more or less the one we have today in the Mediterranean area. But which type of Styrax are we speaking about? The so-called Styrax maximum, classified as such by the paleobotanists of the Miocene, is identical to the present-day Styrax. In all details, it is impossible to distinguish. This is why it has been called maximus, in order to be more realistic, because many millions years has gone since then. So this name is preventing any possible confusion. But anyway, it is exactly the same Styrax, and apparently it was a part of this Laurophilus vegetation covering this area at that time. You see, from central Germany to the Pannonian area, where we have this Pannonian Sea, and what at that time was the large area of sea stretching from the Black Sea today to the Caspian one. The African plate had not yet provided a link between the African Arabian plate with the Eurasian one. So Italy was only a kind of cluster of small islands, and probably not a continuous area as it is represented here. So there is no fossil, both nor here in Italy, nor in what should become Anatolia or the Aegean area at that time. Go on, please. The situation at the end of the Miocene, at the time when the Mediterranean completely desiccated, these areas are not areas of sea, are areas where gypsum has been deposited, which means that water evaporated and left salt and gypsum, and probably only some ponds of water were here, south of Cyprus, and here, west of what is the latitude of Roma today, and here close to the Balearian Islands, but nothing more. At that time, Styrax also maintains the same type of distribution from the point of view of latitude. There is only one sign of a shift to the south. this Bulgarian, very new record from 3 years ago. A new record which is showing that probably the deterioration of the climate that we have from the Eocenian optimum and later on to the Oligocene, Miocene, and so on, was probably providing more harsh conditions at this latitude. But there is not yet any sign of a shift towards the south. Anatolia, the future Anatolia, has not yet provided, probably they are not existing, any fossil, nor what Italy should have become, nor Dalmatia, where today the plant is living. So Styrax is located in what today could be completely an unpredictable scenario, environmental scenario. So what happened probably is something of this type, that this, if we accept that Styrax is, after the results of this research, is in fact a species, a native species in Italy, the model that we have seen here of the displacement of the fossil records speaks about a slow shift of Styrax and probably of all its associates to the southeast. And today this area is the area which has been occupied during the Pliocene or the Quaternary, because we have no fossils of Pliocene fossils in area south of the temperate Europe. So this shift must have been occurring very quickly, and the colonization of this area must have happened after the Miocene, when we have this connection between Anatolia and Northern Africa via the Zagros Mountains and the collision of the Arabian plate with the Eurasian one, and the colonization of Palestine, and the colonization of Cyprus, because Cyprus can only have been colonized during the desiccation of the Mediterranean. But Cyprus is separated from the Mediterranean since 5 million years. So Cyprus shows today similarities with the Italian populations, the genetical similarity, probably only because of the fact that the colonization of this area has not been occurring from the south to the north, but the Italian populations must be the legacy of the descent of the approaching of the extending to south, the migration of the sheep to south of northern population. So all the interpretation of the eastern geo-element of the Italian flora must be completely replaced by another descriptive model. This flora has not colonized something to the northwest, while this flora is a relic of a slow extinction of a flora which occupied a more northern latitude and which has been restricted here. So the similarity between the Italian populations with these ones, and especially the few ones we have detected in Lebanon and in the Levant, could be only explained by this way. These are the new, the last, the southernmost locations which have been colonized, because when this land bridge appeared, this is the time when Italy first was connected to Europe. So it has occurred apparently in the same time. So this similarity could be explained only by the geological assessment of the paleogeographical assessment of this southeast Mediterranean area. This is an hypothesis which is triggered by the result we obtained. So in this diagram, I show, which once was produced in order to show the density of oak species, which instead are colonization after the last glacial Coleman. You see here we have 2 species, here we have 3 species, 5, 8, 11 here. So they have been colonizing Europe after the deglaciation. But if we consider that Quercus itaburensis, which is today the oak occupying, describing the communities here in the Aegean-Anatolian area, especially in the eastern part of this area, is dominating the sites, the stands where Styrax grows. If this Quercus itaburensis has been found here in the middle Pleistocene here, this is a history of extinction toward from northwest to southeast, and only a more recent expansion. But anyway, it is exactly parallel to the finding of Styrax in England, and you remember from the Eocene, which has done exactly the same process of slow shifting to the south according to the deterioration of the climate in late tertiary. So this is more or less the same type of process: reduction, pulsation of the ranges, but a slow decrease along all time from the late tertiary up to now of all these species of the warm temperate flora. And Styrax is paradigmatic for this anyway. So what is left is that probably the same authors, hopefully in future, will study the phylogeography of Styrax in se, because our results today only support the fact that Styrax is native in Italy. All these things I said now are speculations, but built above what could be deduced, inferred by our results. Yes, thank you.